because if there is something frustrating you, if there is something going on, family, relationship, spouse, kids, injury, you don't like what was said, you're having a problem with somebody on the team, whatever it is, you have got to communicate that. All right, welcome back to the Pure Playbook. I'm Dr. Dustin Boston here with the athletic trainer herself, Erin Ruggieri. We are going to kick off a pretty cool episode. Before we do that, though, I don't know how many people watch, but I'm going to throw a disclaimer out there. I still have dust and race car metal in my eyes. So I am not some sort of way. I have not been crying, okay? If you look in my eyes,
look at my eyes.
they are red. They are far less red than they were. So let me just throw that disclaimer out there. I have race car metal junk coming out of my eyes. Well, actually, I think it's done. Yeah. So for those of you, I'm just going to put that to bed right now. All right. So as we get started here, we're going to touch on a lot of things, but we're always going to link it back to physical, mental, relationships, the three pillars of the Pure Athlete, the healthcare side of our practice, our office, as we talk here on the Pure Playbook. So we've got NCAA winding up. That has now completed. UConn and South Carolina both are champions on the basketball front.
Yeah.
So we'll hit a couple things there. We've got a couple injury updates to kind of talk about and give our, not clinical necessarily why we think it happened, but just kind of walk you guys through what this looks like and why it's important that we talk about these things. But because we always do, we want to link it back to not only those three pillars, but also, give some resources, some insight, some things to look for the student athletes themselves, but also their parents. As we know, the biggest things we hear is the gap is where do we go, who do we trust?
Right.
But also bridging the gap for just better resources, how to take care of it, prevent injuries, increase performance, the recovery side. How can we look at these things differently? The perspective, as I continue to say every episode, and bring perspectives on these. So where do you want to start?
Let's start with the physical, the biggest
physical
one right now. So I don't know if you heard, but Mizzou's backup quarterback, and he also is a pitcher on the baseball team. So he's a dual sport athlete at Mizzou. Sam Horn, in February, he tore his UCL. He's getting what's coined as Tommy John surgery.
What's UCL stand for? AT Erin?
Ulnar collateral ligament.
Correct. What's
ding,
that
ding,
protect?
Ding. Ding, ding, ding. What?
What's that protect?
So the UCL is on the inside of your arm. So it's protecting from this valgus motion of the arm. It's super common, it shouldn't be, in throwing athletes, and a lot also in wrestling, based on the positions that they're getting put in, they're putting themselves in. It's kind of a very vulnerable ligament of the arm. You had a run-in with your UCL.
Yeah, he's still there a little bit, but he's much farther repaired than he was. Yeah, that was not good last fall.
Yeah, and so normally when it's a full tear of the ligament, it is a year to 15-month recovery, especially whenever you're returning back to being a pitcher or a quarterback. When it's someone who maybe isn't in sport anymore, it's obviously not as extensive recovery, but if you're going to get back to being that elite level athlete, it is going to be longer.
Yeah, and it is because here's one of the things on that is ligament is one of the longest. It takes the longest to repair.
Yeah.
There's a lot of times where, depending on what class of athlete you are or what it is you're doing, sometimes they'll take a graft,
right,
and they'll just put basically a donor ligament, much like they do. That happens a lot in knees.
Knee a lot.
And they'll take a ligament from somewhere else or a piece of it, or if some people have the extra ligament in their or muscle in their leg called plantaris, they will just take that muscle out. It's not really needed, and they'll use the tendon of it because ligaments do take this. Typically, soft tissues in general take longer to heal. Yeah. It's almost like you'd rather have a muscle strain or a problem in the muscle belly versus having a ligament or soft tissue issue.
Yeah, and a lot of the times, without the UCL, the elbow is very not really supported. It's doesn't really hold it together very well. So the UCL is actually not just one ligament, it's 3 that combines to make the UCL. So it depends on where the tear is, how big the tear is, like how acute it is, if surgery is even needed. A lot of times for surgery, it's more the complete tears, the radial tears of the UCL that require surgery. And then after that surgery, you are put in a brace that you don't move your elbow, because any movement of a ligament while it's still under construction, if you will, is just going to take you backwards. So after you're in that brace or sling or whatever, then you can start moving it with PT and getting back to range of motion and then building strength, and you go from there.
Yeah. And it's important to kind of note this injury because he did have a forearm injury, right, the year prior, and wondering, are these 2 injuries related?
Right.
I would say, yeah.
Yeah.
I would venture to say, with utmost certainty, I'm not going to say 100%, but I would, if I were a betting man, I would say, I would think they are related. How, I don't know the whole situation. I don't know how the original happened. I don't know exactly how the UCL happened, but it would make sense considering the anatomy of the arm and things like that and how it was rehabbed. Not that necessarily anybody did anything wrong, but is there something more to it? How do we look at this differently? Just going forward with similar, whether it's forearm injuries or if it's straight UCL, is there something else going on in the anatomy above and below?
Right.
That's one thing I always look at, especially even on the chiropractic side. It's like, oh, it's right here. I feel it right here. And it's like, well, where you feel it doesn't mean that's always where the problem, the primary is. So one of the first things that I like to look at least, and I think a lot of docs will do this, especially in my field, but I always look above and below. What else is involved? You've got forearm, you've got wrist, you've got up above the shoulder. How does that all come into play, and what else is going on away from where in this situation where this tear is?
Yeah, and I think the forearm injury, like we don't know exactly what it was, but like any injury that happens, like above and below, and even like not in the same limb. Ankle sprains have a lot to do with hips, and then hips have a lot to do with neck. Like it is all connected because you are going to alter how you're playing or you're working out or whatever based on whatever. Because yes, you might get fully recovered from said forearm injury, but you're always going to be in the back of your mind protecting that arm from other things.
Yeah, so the rehab part of this is very important in, getting ever more dynamic. And I think we are always in healthcare, no matter what style of healthcare, whether the orthos, chiros, ATs, whoever, I think we're always evolving. How can we dynamically work this differently? Because there's so much more. I mean, you think of a forearm and you've got all your extensors on, all your flexors on this side, your extensors on this side. You've got biceps up here, triceps on the back. You've got deltoid, and you always talk about the real big look good muscles, but there's so many intrinsic muscles and fibers that go to different areas. And how do you engage those to really support the joint? That way those ligaments do have help. And so looking at this, the perspective side of it. Okay, so now with what we know and what we're bringing to you guys now is it's like, okay, how can we serve these throwing athletes, these wrestling athletes, or really, gymnasts? There's so many people that are really heavy weighted onto their hands depending on the sport that they do. But how can we train them differently? But also, and it goes back to like the pure athlete evaluation that we do, how can we evaluate where athletes are at now? No matter what. It's not necessarily that we're trying to prevent ACL injuries or we're trying to prevent UCL injuries or rotator cuff injuries. It's just like, you are a person, you have all of these things. How do we most support the joint? Because if we want to prevent a ligament issue or a ligament tear that takes the longest to heal, like we said, how can we find the data, do an evaluation, find the data way beforehand that becomes standard for athletes to be able to then build them better and strengthen them in all the areas. So some of these other tissues and, other ligaments, but even the intrinsic muscles across the joint can be stronger to help support so the ligament's not taking so much of the brunt.
Yeah, and then pitchers are just so vulnerable to this, and it also has a lot to do with the pitch count, how much they're practicing. Are they warming up correctly? Are they using bands and all the things to warm up before they just put this load on themselves? So, yes, baseball is a big thing when it comes to UCL, but it is so many things. That's why, like, cheerleaders and gymnastics, like, they walk through everything. They slowly put load on their arms and their body before they just start throwing things because the UCL is such a serious injury. In my opinion, it's just as serious as an ACL in the knee. it's kind of doing the same thing, and so it should be treated the same way.
Yeah, and you said something at the very beginning of this that's important, and I've said this on other podcasts too, is this is a common injury.
Yeah.
It's not normal.
Correct.
So a lot of people will say, oh, it's normal for pitching. No, it's not,
Yeah.
because normal would be like, that's just is. Like, it's guaranteed. It happens 100% of the
Right.
time, and that's just not the case. And then to the fact, too, where I know there was a point in time, and I think there's probably still people that are doing this, where they will intentionally have Tommy John surgery even high school. Like, they're just going to, like, if they know they're come up and they're throwing 80, 85 miles an hour as a young athlete, some have elected to just go ahead and have it done.
Yeah.
I think there is some truth to, well, it's stronger afterwards. And it's like, I think there is some truth to that. I don't think that's the right way to go about it. But, it's common. It's not normal. I would never elect for a pre-surgical scenario to a non-injury joint as a wellness, perspective or a prehab scenario at all.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things, too, that I want to talk about real quick is we have a resource here, actually close to us, former MLB pitcher Brett Graves, who now is one of the owners at Performance Pitching right here in Lake St. Louis. They have created an evaluation. I would say it's not the same for what we're looking for, but they have technology that they put data points on their bodies. It's almost like they're building a baseball game.
Yeah.
If you've ever seen those on the green
Yes.
screens, they got all the dots on them. So it doesn't quite look like that, but when you look at the report of that evaluation, they see all the dynamics, these data points, these lines of how the angles of their arms all the way through their legs and what that pitching looks like. They can do it on catchers. They can do it on any of the throwing athletes. But an evaluation like that, they have people fly in from all over.
Yeah.
And this was before Brett was even there. Brett actually trained at P3. And so before Brett was even there, they had, all-star athletes coming in to train and get this evaluation done. But that's one of the things that, these athletes can do.
Right.
And so if that's a resource that you want to get in touch with, let us know. I can make that happen for you, because I think it's very important. It's something that we're going to collaborate with them on for our throwing athletes, where we can look at the more biomechanical, the overlying, the underneath, the structure and function, where now we can utilize his scenario or his technology to be able to see exactly as they're going through those motions. It's very specific to that motion.
Yeah. I was going to say just a local thing to us, but I know that they are very good at having people come in and fly here for their services.
They've got current MLB pitchers. They've got, the draft picks. They've got high school pitchers. They've got high school that are going D1. They've got, 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds doing this. So it really is a great resource across the board. So just again, one of the things we want to talk about, Bridge the Gap, there's a resource for you to be able to look at that, because this is going to be, in his scenario, it sounds like they say 5 to 15 months. And it's like, whew. But coming off of a second injury to the forearm area, we'll say, it's probably going to be on the longer side of that.
Oh, 100%, especially going, like I said earlier, going back to pitching and quarterback duties.
And then the other thing now, physical mental relationships. So let's jump to the mental side of that. And you already alluded to this as well, is any injury an athlete sustains, and especially in Sam's situation here, having that in the back of your head, especially now twice, mentally on the performance side, mental health looks different across the board. There's performance, there's relational, there's clinical mental health, there's, the drive, perseverance, self-speak, but just the subconscious side of this, where maybe we're not talking depression and yet things like that yet. I'll say yet in there, but what I'm talking about in this perspective is having that in the back of your head and wondering, like, all right, I've got to blow this past this guy. Can I do it?
Right.
That's the last thing you need to think. It's kind of like it was a Top Gun reference. I almost said Days of Thunder. Me and my two movies that I quote.
To say, yeah.
But the Top Gun reference of, if you think, you're dead. And so, but having that in the back of your mind, what does that do to performance? And as performance continues to fall off, if that's what's there, then it can go clinical.
Yeah.
So it's like making sure that we continue to, one, try to prevent these at all costs, but two, just bringing them back better as best as possible and putting that at ease to where they know that they've been rehabbed appropriately and they feel confident.
Yeah, and I think the other thing with that too, that it's kind of mental and physical, is that he is a dual sport athlete, which isn't a very common thing that people do in college nowadays. Usually, like once you're kind of getting serious about something, you kind of have to pick just based on the way that colleges recruit and stuff like that. And so I want to know how much time does he take in between? Is he going to both practices in the fall? How does that work? Because that also can play into the physical and the mental aspect. If he has no time to put up his football cleats and put on his baseball, it's going to be hard. Yeah, that's hard. And so I would love to know how that looks for him and how he manages that, if that were to have any kind of relationship to this as well.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah. So hopefully it's on the shorter end of that 15 months.
You got it.
Yeah, absolutely. So prayers to you, brother. Hopefully that all comes full circle for you very quickly. Get back with a lot of confidence, no subconscious thoughts in the background. Then we can get back to playing, hopefully, even if it's maybe a redshirt opportunity, and keep that year of eligibility and come back next year even stronger. So stick with it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think moving on to the next thing is, big in culture. Culture has a big thing to do with healing and coming back and all the things from injury. And I know, so the Atlanta Falcons, their coach, Raheem Morris, is kind of going viral for the speech that he gave in the first team meeting of the season, which I can imagine is the first team meeting is probably pretty nerve-wracking for everyone involved. You're on new teams, you have new coaches. It's kind of your first expectation of how the season's going to run. And so he's kind of going viral for basically talking about how his culture is going to run.
Being genuine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
Just saying we're going to be in family. We're all you're all important. I need you to start communicating at a higher level and just putting out the expectations that he has before they even become a problem or before you even need to set the expectations is just so important.
Yeah. And that's something, even us working on it here and, how, we lead, the people who work for us and our community who comes and sees us. And we've had this conversation multiple times and really ad nauseum and we always tell our student athletes who do our evaluation, who are under care here and who now that we've got a lot of them committing to D1, 2, and 3 schools, which is super cool. But we always tell them when they start care or we engage relationally on whatever level, if you have questions, ask.
Right.
We can't read your mind. I don't care if it's what kind of toilet paper you use, what supplements do you prefer, what exercises should I be doing, what flights do you buy, I don't care. But if you don't ask, if you don't communicate, or if there's something you don't like, hey, you said this, don't really like what you said there. Hey, this exercise isn't working for me. I don't feel like it's doing anything. I'm not reaching my goals that I had set for myself. Can we rehash those? Whatever it is, because we need the feedback too. So I love what he said as far as I don't care who you are. And the cool thing about this is sometimes you get those speeches where it's I don't care who you are, you're all the same. It wasn't on that level. No. It's look, guys, you're all people here. We're all going to wear the same logo on our backs, and we're going to get after it, and nobody's more or less important than anybody, but you have to communicate with me. There's something you don't like, something you see, ideas that you have, advice that you want to give and throw in do it. You have to communicate better.
Yeah, and you kind of alluded to it, but it also just creates such a good relationship between coaches and coaches and athletes, and really the team and media, which is sucky that you have to think about that relationship, but that has to be a thing on your mind, especially right now. And there's a lot of coaches who take that opportunity and would just take it as that route, the power trip, the showing that they are above everyone else, but that's not the best way to do it.
Yeah, if you're not going to handle it, I'm going to handle it.
Exactly. And so he took that opportunity to make it more of a conversation for that very reason, which is very respectable in the leadership aspect as well.
And it really does set the expectation. And this is something even in the leadership portion, whether it's clinical or growing a team or whatever it is, it's I have learned sometimes the hard way. I've learned the hard way. But it was from naivety too. It's you can always have a good mission. You always have these goals, and you always have this this view and vision of what you're building and where it's going. But then you have these people that you are responsible for, and you are leading. And if you don't communicate on a higher level and set the expectation so everybody knows where they're at, how the communication lines work, and are empowered to say something, give advice, then you're setting yourself up for failure. The whole winging it. If you think we're going to be able to read your mind or coaches are going to be able to read your mind, it's there's a way to have that conversation. And so this is kind of what I want to say on that is, especially when a coach opens the door, you have to stick your foot in it and keep it open and know, because if there is something frustrating you, if there is something going on, family, relationship, spouse, kids, injury, you don't like what was said, you're having a problem with somebody on the team, whatever it is, you have got to communicate that. Anything that you get frustrated about, or it's like if you find yourself talking about another teammate or kind of gossiping, entering the drama realm, you need to trigger yourself to be like, hang on, you know what? Never mind. Take a second and realize, okay, that's when I need to talk to somebody.
Yeah.
That's when I need to say something, and be calm about it and be like, hey, look, I don't know where this is coming from. I don't know how to say this, but kind of just want to communicate and let's have a conversation through this. But as soon as you go into gossip and drama mode and no, this person, I can't believe he said, it's like, whoa, you need to trigger yourself to have a conversation.
Yeah. And I think the NCAA tournament this year has really done a really good job of showing the behind the scenes and like the culture of those teams and the coaches. But of course it is the NCAA tournament and there's a huge amount of pressure on them, but I think them showing how they're handling the pressure and how the coaches are coaching the athletes through that pressure is something that hasn't really been shown before. And I think that's why the like women's tournament has gotten so much looks and press and great things said about it is because of that, how they're showing the realness side of like them in the locker room and how the coaches talk to them, and that they're obviously upset whenever they lose because that's normal. If you weren't upset, you wouldn't care.
Yeah.
And so that's important, obviously, to note as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And might I just interject here and say round applause to all of women's basketball this year. And not because it's the feminine versus masculine, guys versus girls thing, but it's so cool because let me now go to a bold statement and say, you know what, it hasn't been too much fun to watch women's basketball.
Yeah.
I mean, you had some of those teams. You had the UConn teams like when Gino Auriemma still coaches, one of my goats. The legend. Yes. But you had people like Diana Taurasi. You have, and I'm not so well versed. I mean, you have Bird. She didn't necessarily go there, but she go to UConn? No. Where'd she go? Where'd Bird go? But you had some of those in between there. You had South Carolina's coach, who was also Dawn Staley, was an awesome.
I love her.
Yeah, she is
cool.
awesome. And you had few and far between of those, but even not just the Caitlin Clarks, not just Van Lith, not just Beckers, not just, you have a whole product now that is putting on great basketball.
Yeah.
And it's so good to see, and kudos to them because they have worked hard. And again, this isn't a men versus women thing. It's just they have grown and evolved so much as an industry, as a game, that it has been a hell of a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, I mean, the championship game for South Carolina and Iowa broke the NCAA record of viewers.
Yeah.
And that's so cool. I mean, you think of like the amount of things that get shown through the NCAA, and that was I'm getting chills. Like that is just so cool, because earlier in the year it was a Nebraska volleyball, if I'm not wrong, that broke a record again for like the most attended women's.
Wasn't that outside in the football?
Yeah, like it's just it's cool to see because I personally have always enjoyed watching women's basketball more than men's. It comes from me dancing at them and not the men's. So I've just always had a soft spot for women's basketball, but it's really cool to see that.
It's nice to see that something other than women's gymnastics is the top tier.
Yeah.
Like or swimming.
Yep.
It's super cool, and I know they've worked very hard. And let's be honest, I mean the societal bad rap of women's basketball, nobody watches that.
Right.
Stands are empty, and it's like, you know what?
Well, bullshit, because 18.7 million people watched.
But back in the day, it was like that, and I've never been a shit talker on the floor or on the field. I just haven't been. I hate losing more than I like winning. So it's like if I dish it out and we lose, I don't take it well. But I don't ever want anybody to feel bad, made fun of. Somebody has red eyes and it's like, oh, dude, you high or something.
Right.
It's like, no, it's like but stuff like that. I always hated hearing it, and I've always rooted for them to just, I hope that one day this is as viewed and as valued as any other sport, men or women's, gymnastics to freaking croquet, and it's so cool to see it happen.
Yeah, and obviously Iowa made it back to the national championship for that was the consecutive year. And they obviously didn't take home the title, but it's really like not seeming like that was it's like not like a deterring factor for the success of their season.
Yeah.
And that is something that is so hard to sometimes get through to athletes, that it's okay if you're not winning, and it's okay. And obviously they're going to be upset. They're it's a normal human reaction, but it's just the way that it's not really mattering who won or lost. They still made it.
I'm gonna put my finger here. Sam keeps picking up the mic and putting it down. What do you got, Sam? we're rolling. I'll go put my hand here because I'm
perfect. The championship game peaked at 24 million people with an average of 18.7.
Yeah.
And Sue Bird went to UConn. Also.
Yes. Okay. Sue Bird.
UConn's the dynasty.
Yeah. Oh man. Like, just it was always an awesome team to watch play. I mean, I want to say they almost went. It was like 2 full seasons undefeated at one point in time.
I wouldn't be shocked.
Like, it was wild. There's a couple times, well, including I guess this year, they won the championship. I don't know what the record is. We can probably have Sam look this up, but I would probably be safe to say they're one of the only teams to have consecutive or multiple times where men's and women's have both won the national championship. Because I can remember another year, I might have been in high school. It was a long time ago.
I don't remember that.
Where UConn, the men and women's team, both won.
That's sick.
Yeah, so that's super, super cool.
Hit it.
Yep, she got it.
2004 and 2014.
So 3 times now.
Mm-hmm.
The men and women have both won. That's super cool. Has any other team won it? I'll let you look at that while I get my finger off my hat and remember where I was going with this. Because there's a couple things. I'm going to sit up and puff my chest out a little bit. Because the Caitlin Clark interview afterwards, which was kind of appalling, and I hate, in society, we always want to go and we always want to show the drama. People want to know the drama. And it's like, let me tell you, get rid of the drama.
Right.
Like, don't look for the drama. It's like, they went twice and they lost. They're not really that good. Well, they are that good.
Yeah.
But then they had the balls to ask her, like, do you think this has an effect on your career, not only collegiate, but going professional, that you did not win a national championship? Mm-hmm. And she knew it was coming, and I'll talk about the facial expressions. Like, she's sitting here like this, like, here it comes. Like, go ahead, ask the question. I don't think she quite expected that question, but the way she answered it is so true, and every parent needs to encourage this in their athlete. And this goes back to don't praise the statistic that we had with Will Johnston. But the way she answered it, as far as, like, basically the summary of it was, why should that define me?
Right.
Like, it takes 5 on the floor. It takes the whole team. And yes, I was in the limelight, but I'm happy to lead them through it. But if I don't win a championship and I go on to do great things and I affect a community and I affect a team and we grow the sport and we have 20 million views and more girls want to play basketball or more guys, also want to play basketball, and there's a respect that's created, why should me losing back-to-back national championships when nobody hardly ever gets there?
Right.
Why should I let that define me? And that was awesome, because the statistic does not matter. Mm-hmm. It's the effect and the impact that you're going to have, and you get to choose. Unfortunately, I will say right here that sports need to hold their athletes accountable to making a better impact, because they have all these kids looking up to them, and they need more people like Caitlin Clark preaching that, because all we see is the people with the big old chains and earrings, and some of those guys do make a lot of impact. A lot of them don't. Yeah. And they're shit talking, and they're, like Sneed was one of the guys. Like, I'm glad Casey got rid of Sneed, because I'm sick of seeing people taunt people, and it's just have a better impact, not only on the team, but on the community. Build the culture, like you were talking about, that has a bigger impact and effect that's greater than you. And then the other thing I wanted to talk about is, who gives a shit what people think about you? Mm-hmm. There's plenty of people that talk about that are way more viral than I will ever be, and I'm just here to reinforce it. People like Gary Vee and Alex Hormozy and people like Grant Cardone, and but a lot of people that are doing good work and have a big impact. I don't care what you think about their viewership. They're saying the same thing. It's like, you cannot let that affect the thoughts of other people, affect who you are. Realize the impact you're making, and if you're not making an impact, then self-reflect and do that. But who gives a shit what people think about you? Yeah. I think that's very important. So I just applaud Caitlin Clark. I love the correction her dad gave her. Mm-hmm. And it's like, shut up. Like, what are you doing? Like, how are you involved in that? Is like, I could see it on his face. It's like, you're complaining about something that should have never happened because you were involved in creating what happened. Right. Like, and so it was, to have him sit there, cock his head, it's like ingrained, and it's like, good for you. But at the same time, that level of parenting where he wasn't totally in an uproar, mm-hmm. and there was a connection there, but that didn't happen just then. Right. I would love to see 10, 15 years ago when she was playing ball, or whenever mm-hmm. she started playing ball, and their relationship as she was growing up, mm-hmm. there was that connection of, he didn't get all irate and stand up. It was a head cock and was just like, shut up. Yeah. And it was like, ooh, okay, course correct, boom, go. And we went on.
Right.
And I think that's super important. So there's no need to get irate. That can happen behind the scenes because a lot of kids quit sports in the car. And in that moment on the stage when cameras happening for him there was an understanding there. There was a comfortability. There was a whole lot of development and relational equity that, oh, well, it's not always guaranteed.
Right.
So that was super cool on the mental and relationship side of things. That's a super cool thing to see.
Yeah, we've talked about on the court a lot, but also like off the court, the amount of pressure and like mental toll that all of them have had to go under for NCAA tournament. I mean, social media is a huge thing now, and especially like Instagram and TikTok reels and all of the things. Like they are really doing nothing behind the scenes anymore. They're not getting ready behind the scenes anymore. They really don't have a quiet warm up. It's all televised. I mean, I saw a video of Iowa's last warm up or had a practice, their last practice. The stadium was full. I'm like, that's not even a practice. Like it's
a showcase.
That's literally like a scrimmage. Like they were packed to the ceiling watching them practice their final practice. And I'm like, so they literally have no time to turn it off. They are always on. And for someone who maybe that isn't like their strength is to always be like in front of the camera and on, that it just has to drain them. And so to be able to do that for the entire tournament, if you make it all the way there, then to have to go play a game that is expected to be your best game ever at all times, like that is just an insane amount of pressure that I'm glad that is being televised in interviews like that.
Yep. And here's what I hope. This is a deeper conversation. I'll just get on and get off of this too. But it just came to me as you were talking about that, is I hope all of the Iowa fans, the faculty, the team, the coaching staff, I hope somebody like Caitlin Clark, who is in all the right ways a polarizing aspect of that community, that school, that team, just because she is gone, don't let that predict or affect the culture of what you're about to have. There's always successors. There's either one that's coming up or one's going to turn into it.
Yep.
And it's like, if you want to be that person, if they're on that team, the younger ones coming up, it's like, you didn't lose Caitlin Clark.
Right.
I hope they all continue to use her as a resource, and I'm sure Caitlin will be more than happy to be as available as possible to do it. You have to communicate and reach out, but I hope the fans are like, oh, they're going to suck next year. It's like, don't even put that out there.
Right.
Because that's what a lot of people will do. That's our society. We go into comfort and we convince ourselves of the worst thing that's going to happen, so when it happens, we're okay with it. But you're just putting in the universe. Like, I just hope that people don't do that. I hope they build up this next team. I hope they don't also hold the candle of the new team to the candle of the Caitlin Clark team. Because one, that's not fair. It's apples to oranges, but there is always a successor. I mean, you look at Tiger, and then you've got, yes, he is the polarizing figure of golf, but there was Jack Nicklaus before him, Jack and Arnold, and then you had Jordan and Kobe, and it's like, it's always evolving, and nobody's one better. It's apples and oranges. So I just hope it doesn't affect the culture and the prediction, because here's the good news of all of that, as we twist that perspective, is also because of Caitlin Clark, imagine the draft class, or the draft class, but the recruiting class they're going to have.
Yeah.
The people who are driven enough to want to carry on that same culture, that same product of basketball into Iowa. Imagine if she was never there. It's like, then you really would have sucked for longer. It's like, but because she was there, she had an impact that's going to be able to keep that level of consistent basketball there, as long as the culture there allows it, welcomes it, and is ready for it, and has that perspective going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a hard thing, like going year to year to not compare, but like I make a rule that we're not allowed to talk about the past years, because it's just it's not fair to the new people. It's not fair to returners. It's not fair to coaches to have to coach through all of the things that have happened in the past, because if coaches do that, if team members do that, like, you're never really moving on from another team.
Yeah, you're not in the current moment.
Yeah. And so, like, it's a rule that you're not allowed to talk about it.
Yeah. If you're going to live in the past, you're going to live in the past. Like, the windshield's bigger than the rearview mirror for a reason, and live there, because if you're going to dwell on the past of something like that happening, you're going to get the same result, if not worse. You're never going to advance going forward. So, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and, like, I mean, that's what makes teams so special, is that every year should be different. It should be faced with different things. You're going to get faced with different adversities. You're going to have new people. You're going to have other competitors who are also doing different things. So that's like the beauty of sports, is that not all the years are like the same. It wouldn't be fun and exciting if it was. If we watched the script happen every year, it wouldn't be fun.
And imagine all the fans and everything that they have acquired, that they have won over the past couple years since the spotlight has happened. And yes, we're talking about the Caitlin Clark thing right now, but I'm trying not to say her name too much, because all programs have this effect. And because of someone, something, some trophy, some accolade, some virality of some sort, you win people over with that. And so staying on that same perspective of taking the culture you have and continuing to evolve it, it's like you have more people following and watching you now. Like, momentum is real. Don't let that die out because of your preconceived notions, or, you know, what was, and, oh, we lost this person, or this happened, we lost 2 in a row, like whatever it is, because you've also won over a lot of people who are willing to stick with you. That's the one thing, not only about sports, but as relationships as a whole. Once you come into a relationship, no matter, like, there's people that have never met anybody on Iowa's campus, anybody at the Lakers, you know, anybody in you know, New England and with the Patriots when they were a dynasty, that are still very loyal to that team.
Right.
And they, you know, all teams and even athletes, we can take this down to the person. Those relationships that are built, that's momentous. And as soon as you shut it off and kill it, you don't start halfway back behind the wave. Like, now you're at still water and you have to grow that again.
Right.
Continue to ride that wave, especially as a student athlete. Ride the wave, make an impact, continue to, like, don't convince yourself of anything else. Find the resources to help, have the attitude and perspective to take that momentum forward and continue to build.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's exciting to see where, I mean, obviously we're talking about women's basketball right now, that where it's going to go. Like you said, like, there's just going to be so many people who maybe didn't think that they could play in college, and they're going to play in college. And maybe there's people who are trying to pick between something in or something in basketball, and they're going to pick that now because of the impact that really just like this like whole class has had. I mean, there's Haley, there's Caitlin, there's Angel Reese, there's so many people who have had an impact, and there's people who you connect with more, and that's why it's so great that they are so in the public.
Juju's a freshman at you know, she'll be a sophomore next year at USC.
Yeah. And so there's just so many people that you can connect with, and depending on who you do connect with, you have access to them now.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes we don't know where we're going with this. We've got Sam's great outline, and we just kind of wing it from there. But that was good. I'm enjoying what's happening in the world of sports. I enjoy what's happening micro and macro, even on the healthcare side, as we're starting to connect more with people there. And so I'm about wore out of that one. Whew. About brain dead. Sam, you got anything? You got any ask better questions, get better answers? Otherwise, we're going to wrap up and go to lunch.
No, I do have an answer to your question, though.
We have any new news?
New news. The only other 2 teams to win in the same year, women's and men's, were Louisville in 2013 and then Duke in 1999. So they are in a UConn, Louisville,
out of
Duke.
How many years has this tournament been going on with both teams, both genders playing in this tournament?
Yeah. So a very, very small elite group.
And now they've got 3.
Yeah. I mean, something else just to wrap it up is, like, last year the women's tournament got a lot of public press because of the lack of resources that the NCAA was getting them. And then fast forward to now, it's like the most watched thing. I just think that's really cool to note, because I remember last year, like,
momentum.
I don't remember who it was. It was a player, like, was posting, like, look at our weight room versus theirs. Look at our NCAA swag versus theirs. Look at our meals versus theirs. And now they're like, oh yeah, like,
we've got a chef. You've got McDonald's.
Right. And so now it's like, okay, well, we have 20 million people watching our games. Like, it's just, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that. It wasn't just one person. There were multiple girls that were like, this is here. And they like showed the court, and it was like cut in half, whereas the men had the whole thing, and they had like the recreation, like bouncy floor gym to like
they had like a rack of dumbbells. That was what they were given to work out while they were there. Because it's basically like you're going over to boarding school whenever you enter the like March Madness NCAA tournament. Is you just like kind of move in, and then you stay as long as you win.
Yeah.
And so you should be giving them all the things. So again, that's just really cool to see the momentum of what a year can do.
Yeah.
So
absolutely. It happens fast. It can happen fast. It can. All right. Well, good episode.
Yeah.
Proud of us. Proud of everybody out there for listening. Continue to follow us, at the Pure Athlete on the healthcare side of things, at the Pure Playbook, where we're posting some clips up, some rewinds, and some bloopers, I'm sure, that are coming. We have a awesome conversation tonight with a team, which is going to be super cool as we continue to implant our resources for our young student athletes in our area. So hope you guys have a great rest of your week. See ya.